views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and editors and journalists and writers and photographers and filmmakers, anybody putting stuff out in the Bronx. In our second segment today, we've got a guy who is incredibly talented. He's actually a comic book writer and one of the best in the nation, of course, from the Bronx. And we'll spend a little time with him. But to get started, we're going to talk to the economics and transportation reporter for the Mott Haven Herald. It is David Westenhaver. Nice to have you with us, David.
Thanks for having me.
David, you're new. You're here for in the Bronx and in the city for the great Craig Newmark Journalism School. A little background, you were telling me earlier, you're from Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you like the idea of coming to New York for school?
Yeah, I've liked the idea of coming out to New York since I was a kid, so I'm very happy to be here.
You know, one of the things that is always interesting to us in the Bronx is, you know, when people come here, what's their reaction? So what was it that made you say, gee, I live in Portland all the way out there, but I wanted to come to New York City?
There is just so much going on here that I like the pace of the city. No matter what it is that you're interested in, New York is going to be the center of the country for that thing. So there's a lot of stories to tell here, and that's why I wanted to come here specifically for journalism.
What interests you about journalism? When did you get started? When did you say, you know, I like this?
I've loved writing since I was a kid, really since I was in elementary school. But I think just over the past few years, I decided it was something that I wanted to do as more than just a hobby, something that I wanted to get into professionally, telling other people's stories, helping them to put their story into words and share it with the world. So that's what I love to do most, and that's why I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now.
I particularly like the fact that, and we'll talk about news and we'll talk about what you've already written for the Mott Haven Herald in a moment, but I particularly like the fact that you like the craft and that your website, which is, I guess, davidwestenhaver.com, is that what we're talking about, has you presented as a writer of anything. So is it news specifically that drives you, or you just like the fact that news happens to be another really cool way to do some writing?
It's a little bit of both. I love writing. It's definitely the form of storytelling I'm most experienced in. When I first started writing semi-professionally, I was doing all kinds of freelance work from email marketing to website copy and really anything I could do just to get some writing on my resume. But that was all just part of the process into getting where I could write for journalism.
So that's the ultimate goal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because, of course, as you know, I've been doing news and talk for a very long time. I understand that if this is the only thing you do, you won't be as good at it. And if you're a writer and you do all that other stuff, just very quickly, and then I do want to talk about a couple of things you wrote about in the Bronx. This guy, Simon Whistler, you apparently have written his videos. He gets hundreds of thousands of clicks. So just tell me about who he is and what you do for those videos.
Yeah, Simon is kind of a YouTube news producer, not just news, but he runs about 10 different YouTube channels that really tell stories almost as a mini documentary series.
Issues. He deals with issues, it seems.
Yeah. He has a wide variety. So I got started working for him, writing for 2 channels called Mega Projects and Side Projects, where we tell stories about big infrastructure projects. I did one about the New York subway system before I moved out here. And then another one called...
I got to go check that. I got to check that out. That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yep. And yeah, so
you know what would be interesting is for you to do that now after you've been around a little bit and you got stuck a few times and it took forever, and then sometimes it was particularly fast and you were like, oh, what was I worried about? I got there.
Yeah, I have a whole new perspective on that.
I'm sure you do. So those are the kinds of things that you wrote the script for him to. You did the research. That's really great work. So let's talk about the Mott Haven Herald. Now let's be clear to viewers. David has only started school, like I guess in August sometime.
Late
So
August.
you haven't had it. You're going to be writing stuff. This is a way of introducing you, because when you come back, then we won't have to do all this groundwork to establish who you are. So the story that was interesting to me, because nobody's written about it in a while, is this notion of the Borough Jails Plan, with jails all over the city, but in Bronx particularly over there on Concord Avenue. What do you know? What'd you find out?
Yeah, so there hasn't been a lot of news or updates on that story for a while, until in late August. The Department of Design and Construction released a notice of intent where they described, they gave us a few more details about what the jails are going to be like. They mentioned that all 4 of them will have 884 beds, which is a lower number for the Bronx branch in particular. That number was higher before. They also stated that each jail is going to cost between about $1.5 and $1.8 billion. They laid out the process for finding the companies that are going to design and build those jails. And then the last thing they did was shed some light on their new pricing policy that's designed to keep the costs low for the entire project. They called it a guaranteed maximum price policy.
Well, that you haven't been around the Bronx that long. That is music to our ears, because I think of that water treatment plant. You may not know about it, which was built in the North Bronx, said to be under $1 billion, and it came in at the end at $4 billion. So so I understand that. So I guess the message to many Bronxites who did not want the jail in that spot, or is the message to those people, the fighting is done, that's where the jail is going. In other words, there were others who said, the jail should be closer to the courthouses. There's some logic to that. But do you get the sense that this is it? No more questions, no more dialogue. Here's the plan.
That seems to be the case at the moment. I know that a lot of people in Mott Haven aren't ready to wave the white flag right now.
They'll never accept it. Yes.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah, so they're still working hard on having their voices be heard. This is something that public officials said from the beginning, that they wanted to get the community involved in the process, and a lot of people in the Mott Haven community in particular feel like they were able to speak but not really heard in terms of the location of the Mott Haven.
Didn't matter what you said.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like you do it with a kid and you let the kid cry. Okay, You're done now. Now we're still going to grandma's house. So what is the timing? I saw timing was like still in the future. Obviously Rikers has got to be taken apart. What do you have a sense about the timing for that?
So the timeline is still set for about 2027, possibly 2026, for when Rikers will close down and those new jails will be ready to open. The process of even choosing the firms to design and build the new jails, that's going to be probably about another year. It's a pretty drawn out process. There's 3 or 4 more steps along the way before they reach that point.
Well, so it's at some point, David will have gone through graduate school, will have completed graduate school, and then we'll be writing about this on the other end as a professional journalist somewhere. And you'll think of the education you will have gotten as a result. So you're going to be writing about a lot of stuff about economics and transportation. Boy, wait till you roll up your sleeves and we get into you about the bicycles and the bicycle lanes, and all that stuff. So there's plenty to talk about. I'm sure we'll have you back. One of the things which has come up, to me, it's almost like a no big deal. It's in a way a no-brainer, is that they wanted to rename a street for Derek Jeter around Yankee Stadium, and you wrote a brief story about that. It just seems logical, incredibly popular. What do you know about that?
Yeah, it's something that the 161st Street Business Improvement District is spearheading. They were really heavily involved after Mariano Rivera retired with getting River Avenue named Rivera Avenue. So this is the corner right outside of Yankee Stadium obviously Derek Jeter is, right up there with the most beloved Yankees of all time. So it was a no-brainer for them. They love Derek Jeter here in New York. I loved Derek Jeter as well. Even growing up a Seattle Mariners fan, I had some pain in my heart when Derek Jeter.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing from a guy from the other side of the country.
Yeah.
I mean, the Yankees have no limit to the number of heroes who could have a street named after them.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Mariano Rivera and Derek Jeter. Those are only recent. I mean, you could go as far. I mean, do we have Whitey Ford Avenue? I mean, do you have Roger Maris Avenue? I mean, so anyway, that's just my thought about that. But if people want to do it, so they're talking about a section of 161st Street.
Yeah, it's a corner where it intersects with Rivera Avenue now. So they're calling it the crossroads of the baseball world, where Rivera Avenue and Jeter Street cross.
There you go. I know that the people at the Yankee Tavern are all involved. Listen, if you and I were a lot older, we could have gone in there one day and sat down, and Babe Ruth would have been sitting next to us. That would have been pretty interesting. Anyway, David, so David Westenhaver, we're going to see and read more of him. Are you working on anything now that we should start looking out for?
I have an article coming out shortly. This one's more Hunts Point focused. The Hunts Point Forward plan is they're putting together a kind of a vision for the next 10 to 15 years in Hunts Point. They had a back to school fair the other day where they solicited feedback from the community. So that should be coming out in the next day or two at the Hunts Point Express, which is another paper that I'm writing for. And besides that,
that's actually a really big story. I mean, again, you don't have the perspective of years like I do. We've been talking about that stuff for a very long time. No question about it. So you expect that to come out sometime this week, next week?
Yeah, that'll be out sometime this week. And besides that, just working on as many, business, economic, or transportation stories.
Right.
Looking for all sorts, talking about the Bruckner Expressway, Sheridan Expressway.
Listen, there's tons here. People in the Bronx know exactly what they are, and we're going to look for you at the Mott Haven Herald and the Hunts Point Express, and we'll certainly have you back here to discuss some of those issues that you unravel for us. David Westenhaver. Excuse me, Westenhaver.
Yep.
Sorry. Got it. Thanks for joining us, and we expect to have you back. People can check him out at David Westenhaver.com, and also certainly at the Mott Haven Herald. Thanks, Dave. And we'll take a short break. When we come right back, I told you we're going to have a great guy, great talent, a comic book writer who has just won a major literary award. Don't go away.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am really excited about this segment, mostly because the guest is a longtime friend of mine, but also he's one of, I think, the most talented and versatile artists and writers in the borough of the Bronx. So my good friend Alex Simmons, nice to have you with us.
Hey, Gary, so good to see you again. Always a pleasure, frankly.
They don't know, but we just caught up about our families. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Alex,
but we can if you want to. I mean,
people would relate. I mean, listen, our kids went to school together. That's what their relationship is. But what I'm really excited about, you just won an award. If I say Black Panther, people will know what that means. The Tales of Wakanda. You're going to hold up something here.
Yes. There we go. Wait, we got to get right on the. No, it goes this way. There we go. Okay. Yes, this is an anthology of 18 stories about the Black Panther and Wakanda. So it's not just the Black Panther, but it's the world of Wakanda. And the anthology was conceived by the journalist and writer Jesse Holland, who pulled together 18 other writers, myself included, to do individual stories about the Black Panther, about the Dora Milaje, about Wakanda itself, about the lineage, all of that. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful collection of this. And this just came out, the book just came out, I believe it was March of this year. But they also did an audio book version of it, and that just won one of the best awards. So we are all quite excited. And it's a funny thing too is one of the other writers on this is Nikki Giovanni. That's a name that may ring a bell with a few folks out there.
But you should say who she is.
Nikki Giovanni is one of the well-known Black poets from I think it goes back to the late 70s, 1970s. She's also a professor and a number of other scholarly pursuits and accomplishments. But she's very well known as a poetess and a writer. And I met her when I guess she was in her 20s and I was like 18 or something like that. We just met when she was doing an interview and we talked. It was like suddenly we became fast friends. And then I didn't see her for like decades. And then we ran into her again at a Comic-Con, which was funny.
Over this project.
Right. And no, it was a different project in South Carolina. And then we didn't see each other for another like 10 years. And then suddenly here we are in this book. So the universe is saying something about Simmons and Giovanni that we are, connecting every now and then to work on something, do something, see something, talk about something, and then onward again. So.
I want to rewind the clock. So,
sure.
Launched right into that. Your background, though, really has been as a comic book writer. You won the Inkpot, the prestigious Inkpot Award in 2017. Talk to me about comic book writing, what you did, and maybe how it has grown and developed into even other things that you work on now.
Well, the funny thing about it is, for my mother, a dear, lovely, warm, wonderful person as she was one of, she was from that generation that basically saw comic books as funny books. They had no purpose other than some sort of minor entertainment, and it wasn't real literature, it wasn't real writing or reading. But she never stopped me from reading them. She never stopped me from enjoying kids shows and things like that. And so the bottom line was, I had this active imagination. I was always making up stories and playing with my action figures, not dolls now, action figures. And so my mind was always whirling with these possibilities. And so as I grew up, I actually went into acting first. I graduated high school of art and design, studying art, and illustration, and then pursued acting. And for a number of years, I did some stage work and some, extra work in films and a little bit of work on television and voiceover work.
We get to the comic books, and then you created a Blackjack, which was an iconic character.
Right. Well, what I was saying is the comic book connection was the writing in that of going from performing to writing and from writing plays and things to writing comic books. And so, again, the imagination was just crazy. And yes, I created this series called Blackjack, which is about an African-American soldier of fortune in the 1930s. This is one of the books. This is one of the prose books about him. But, it's a Black action-adventure hero. And again, from my childhood, there weren't any. There was always white action-adventure heroes, white detectives, white monster fighters. And in my head, I wanted to be able to do that kind of cool stuff, or imagine myself and my friends doing that stuff. So when you get older, if you're fortunate enough, you can follow that sort of pathway and create what wasn't there. And so that's what I got to do.
There's a very fascinating development there, because I don't know that we've talked about these kinds of things for years. I don't know that I've ever heard you say it was kind of your fantasy acting that created that character. I'm not aware that you're maybe.
Normally when we talk, we're talking about the Kids Comic Con, which is a whole nother thing, and some other stuff. So yeah, I don't think I've had the chance to speak on that.
And then the other thing I want to tell you, when I was a youngster, my parents, who were both educators, were very concerned because me and my brothers, all we read were comic books. And I think they went to our pediatrician and they said, they seem to be smart guys, but they all they read is comic books. And the pediatrician said, just as long as they're
reading.
And
exactly.
So, I think even there was one point my father put the DC comics at the top of the closet so we couldn't access them. But then ultimately we got them back. You do a lot of teaching. You and I, we talked about it earlier on our other program, Bronx Talk. You had brought kids who are creating comic books. What's it been like being with kids now through the pandemic? I'm thinking that the fantasy, that their ideas, because they've been cooped up and they've been wearing masks, now they're thinking about other things, or I don't know. What do you find in their heads that expresses itself in the comic book world?
This has been interesting, and I'll just try and be very succinct about this. As far as Kids Comic Con, we did a couple of virtual comic conventions because, yes, the kids are all cooped up and didn't have a lot to look forward to, and this was one outlet. So we did a live puppeteers and artists doing demonstrations, streaming from their homes, and also we had recorded segments of similar things. And that was like a what we called a Saturday morning special, and we did it that way. I was at the same time, I was going virtually into some after school programs and doing the work that way as well. And a KCC, Kids Comic Con, received an award and a grant this past year. We got it in the fall of 2020, and we were working on it in 2021, where we were using comics again through the virtual computers and situations. We were working with young men, African American men and Latinos, and using comics to explore racial identity and to explore heritage and culture and how they see their future and the world. And so literally the imagination or the imaginary power of comics to envision anything and suddenly create it was very powerful during the pandemic. What was challenging was that kids were spending so much time on computers doing the schoolwork and everything else that you had to approach teaching a fun activity differently on computers. You had to not think of it the same way, like a sort of an organized workshop. You had to give them play time. You had to give them breathing time, because really it's like how many hours do you want to stay glued to the screen?
Right. And I will say, I mean, what I knew there was going to be a catch in there, and I fully understand it. What I was going to say, and the way I started it, it seems to me, if you can get them to focus on these things, this is the best thing, because they can play out their fantasies, they can color and draw and become a superhero.
Exactly.
Solve the pandemic. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, again, the imagination, what is, and then what if. And literally, once you give them what if and get out of their way or encourage them, they go off into some remarkable things, which we don't have time to go into. But during some of the workshops, there were some remarkable, wonderful revelations or creations that some of the kids came up with, including a festival we had April 30th. We had Kids Comic Con Africon. So we had kids online from the United States as well as from Africa, listening to African comic book artists talk about their process and their pursuits and showing their work. And the kids were blown away. And one turning point for a group of kids was there was a translator for one of the artists, because he did not speak English. And the kids were going, why is that lady talking about her artwork when we're seeing this man's artwork? And we had to explain that she's translating for him. And the kids went, translating? I said, yes. And it was like, it appeared to be the light bulb went on for them, that they had not realized that even existed, that people could translate from African dialect into English, and yet this man is talking about something they understood, which is drawing comics and having an imagination creation.
And you, we don't have time to do that, but you to talk in detail about it. You've traveled the world, literally talking about comic books, which I have learned through you is a universal language.
Absolutely. Russia,
Africa,
Serbia, Russia, Serbia, Holland, Amsterdam, and Haarlem in the Netherlands. I've been to a number of locations, India, and yes, it is a universal language because we are all human beings.
Well, wouldn't it be nice to find things like this that continue to bind us? So what's next? Let's see. You say you never stop. You got anything on the list now?
Well, I'm right now. I'm working with a group of students out of the New York Film Academy, where I'm teaching screenwriting. I have a property that's sitting in Hollywood. It's been optioned, and I'm waiting for someone to sign on the dotted line where we have our fingers crossed. So I'm hoping that will become a reality. And once it does, I will be happy to come back and tell you about it. And we have a couple of really great projects coming up for kids with comics through Kids Comic-Con. So I'll be talking about that the moment it's locked in its definite form and dates.
When I think about the best of the Bronx, Alex Simmons is on my list because you're just doing it. It's not about fame. I mean, a little fortune wouldn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, it would be nice, but
But you're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You found a vehicle to communicate to people, to bring people together. Your social media, how do people get to you?
I will say that quickly, or you can post that, but I'll just back you up with one quick thing, and I'll just simply say that I've been blessed enough that kids I started teaching when they were 13 years old here in the Bronx, 13 years of age, are now in their 30s, and many of them have come back to tell me the positive impact that the arts have had. So yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I can be found on Instagram at Simmons Alexander. That's my name backwards. On Facebook is Alexander Simmons or Simmons Here and Now. And again, look me up.
We got to run. We're going to run out of time. The great Alex Simmons, my neighbor, my friend, my brother. And my Bronx boy.
Yes, there you go.
We are
homies. Right.
Thanks to David Westenhaver and to Alex Simmons. We'll see you next week. Good night.